How you feeling?
Good.
What's your pain?
-1.
This is Greg. 10 years ago, he had chronic back pain that came out of nowhere. And just like a lot of you,
As I mentioned to you, the injections, that really were ineffective. They really were. And the fourth one, wow, that fourth one left me in more pain for a longer time.
you see, here's the problem. Anyone who develops lower back pain as they get older is told that it's normal and you just have to deal with it. But if you do try to treat it, it becomes even more difficult because usually your pain comes out of nowhere. Physical therapists tell you it's weak muscles, so you do all the exercises they give you, yet your pain is still there. You try injections in your spine that just create more pain than you originally had, just like Greg. Or you're pretty much told to suck it up because this is the norm. But what if I told you there's another reason for your back pain that everyone's missing? And not only can you get rid of your back pain in under an hour if you dress this one thing, but you can also get strong enough to be able to do this. What's your goal?
To see how far I can get without a cane. Actually, going around the entire complex here without the cane
Okay.
would be really good.
That's a good start. Adam here from trainingmassage.com. And this is a simple case study on how I helped Greg not only get rid of his lower back pain, but also help him get strong enough to be able to walk without his cane in only 2 60-minute sessions. I noticed on there the first thing was you have more issues walking, but your pain goes away sitting.
Right. Because both sitting and leaning forward, because that puts more space between the discs and they're not pressing in quite as much on the nerves, etc. But the important thing is not to give up walking.
Correct, yeah.
That is really important to maintain a good posture. That will help to reduce the pain while walking. And it just for overall health, walking is a great thing.
I 100% agree with that. My question here is, you already saw a physical therapist.
Uh-huh.
What did they have you do? And was it effective? What were the results like? What did you do it for?
Well, I had 2 visits with a physical therapist, and it really was kind of some stretching exercises, making sure that I could maintain my balance while doing the exercises. And then at the end of both sessions, I got on, they had a, stationary bike, got on that, and boy, that was good. It was not painful to my back, really. It didn't make it worse. In fact, it felt better. And it also is good for the, cardiovascular, aerobic, and so on and so forth.
So the pain got better with these stretches and the bike.
Yeah.
How long did it stay good for, basically? How long were the results for, would you say?
I would say, for the rest of that day.
Now, one little trick I like to use to try to figure out what's going on with my client's pain is to ask them what kind of treatments their previous doctors gave them. And the reason why is because if I'm able to see what kind of doctor gave what kind of treatment, then I can pretty much try to reverse engineer it and figure out what I need to do as a sports massage therapist. A quick example of this is if your physical therapist told you to strengthen the muscles in your upper back, then that tells me to release the muscles in the pec major and minor as a sports massage therapist. So you tried physical therapy.
Yeah, I would like to go back, if only to ride the bike. No, I think, as time allows, I know the therapists are busy. It's not always easy to get scheduled with them. But yeah, I'm sure it would be a big help, as opposed to, as I mentioned to you, the injections that really were ineffective. They really were. And the fourth one was, I guess, called facet blocking.
Mhm.
And it was purported to be perhaps greater help when the epidural injections didn't seem to work. Wow, that fourth one left me in more pain for a longer time. And yeah, so I said, boy, I don't know if we're barking up the right tree here.
Going back to your pain, what would aggravate it to about a 5 or 7? Like if you just, like, let's just say if bending over was to aggravate it highly for you, even though it doesn't for you specifically, what kind of actions would aggravate it, like immediately, as opposed to short term? Sorry, as opposed to a slow duration.
It's almost always gradual. I mean, but I suppose standing in one spot for several minutes, and I recall just going to quote Walmart, no commercial meant for them, but waiting in line, in a long line, got to be both tiresome and painful.
Is this with the cane as well?
Yeah.
Even with the cane?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just standing in one spot, walking was probably even less painful, but just standing in one spot got to be pretty painful.
Now, this is some key information right here. Gradual pain while standing or even walking tells me there's some kind of muscle tightness in the body that's creating tension and probably creating this pain every time he goes into extension or standing up, pretty much. But then the same tissues become relaxed and loosened every time he sits down, resulting in less tension and less pain. Now, if you know what muscle I'm talking about here, then make sure to leave it in the comment section below. Now, the first thing I started with was internal and external rotation in the hips. And the first thing I noticed was that he was limited in internal rotation, telling me that he might have shortened or tight hip external rotators, preventing the internal rotation. Now, on top of that, I also did a leg lift with him to try to see his hamstring tightness and then if that recreated his pain. Sadly, I don't think this was a really good test because Greg did have an issue relaxing the body and relaxing his legs throughout the movement, which kind of nullifies the results. Is nullify the right word? Who cares? On top of that, I also checked his hips to see if they were even or not, to see if there are any signs of lateral pelvic tilt. And to my surprise, they were pretty even, so that's a good sign. And then from there, I flipped him over and tested his quad tightness, again, to see if those front hips or hip flexors are creating his pain every time he stands up. And with this case, he only felt tightness in the quads, which is normal, and that tells me it's probably not the quads creating his issues. And then finally, I checked his lateral pelvic tilt one more time on the posterior side of the pelvis. And again, everything looked even. So after going through his assessment and having him lay on the table, here was the game plan. First off, I'm going to be working on the stomach area in order to warm it up. And this is mainly for preparation to get into the deeper muscle, the psoas, which I believe is the main cause for his pain. And the reason why I believe that is because the psoas not only attaches to the lumbar spine, where he was having his herniated disc, his spinal stenosis, but also every time you stand up, that muscle gets stretched out. So that means if the muscle is shortened already and you try to stand up, it's going to create tension on your lower back, pulling on the spine and maybe creating tension and pain. And then, of course, the pain goes away because when he sits down, the muscle is able to shorten and relax and is not creating tension anymore on the spine. So with that said, I worked on his psoas for about 3 to 5 minutes, including the iliacus. Now from here, I moved down into the TFL and the quads a little bit just to kind of loosen up the other hip flexors. And then, of course, I went and worked on the other side of the body. Now, on top of the psoas, I also wanted to work on the quadratus lumborum, also known as the QL, because the QL works hand in hand with the psoas to surround the spine, along with a few other muscles, of course. So for the next 15 to 20 minutes, I worked on the muscles around the spine. This includes the erectors in the beginning to try to warm it up and try to push it away from the spine. And then I also went and worked on the deeper quadratus lumborum in order to release that and the fascia system in there. And then finally, I went to work on the glute area. This is mainly the glute max and the piriformis underneath. And that was because of the previous test where we saw he had limited internal rotation. And I believe that's because he was probably tight with external rotation, a very common issue with a lot of men specifically. Now this takes us into the next phase of the plan, which is to help restore the tissues, which means to stretch out the muscles we just worked on. So starting off with the psoas, you can see here that I'm able to stretch out the hip flexors by pushing that knee down and having that other knee on top to support the body. And when I do this, I'm just simply pushing down as gently as I can until I feel resistance and until he begins to feel a stretch in the hip flexor area in the pocket region. And then we get into the quadratus lumborum stretch, the QL stretch, which I did make up and I believe is one of the best stretches for your QL if you do it this way. Because not only are you stretching out your lower back, you're also stretching out the hips, the side of the hips pretty much, and the lats and everything else in between. So if you have a partner and you're able to do this yourself, go ahead and give this a try. I promise it will feel amazing. So now that we were done stretching out the muscles for about 10 minutes, I wanted to do a quick post-assessment to see if we have any improvements, very specifically in his hip internal rotation, which we actually did. So I call that a win already. Remember, the rest of the assessment didn't show many problems here. So the big issue, I believe, was tightness in the body, creating tension, but not necessarily enough tension to create mobility issues. But I didn't want to stop our test there because I also wanted to see how he walked after our first assessment. So we went for a little spin.
I got up the stairs great.
Did you have issues prior?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
The doc,
How you feeling?
good.
What's your pain?
-1.
That's good.
I know, 0, yeah.
Okay, good. Now, this is where we ended our very first session. And as you can see from his text, he was not only feeling better for the next few days, unlike his PT visits, but he was even able to recover the feeling in his feet, which is something he was not able to do since his spinal issues. But we're not done yet because we scheduled a follow-up session the very next week. And here, the goal wasn't necessarily to help him get rid of his pain, but to actually help him walk without his cane. Damn, that rhyme though. And before we even started his second treatment, I did want to get a pre-test to see how far he's able to walk around the building without his cane. And to my surprise, he already passed his previous record from last week, which tells me not only has he been working on himself, but also the results from last week are still there. And during his second assessment, my main focus here was to do a basic strength test for his legs. And what I noticed was he was a lot weaker in his left leg versus his right. And more specifically, he had a lot more weakness when it came to pushing into my heels, kind of going into hip extension pretty much. And then even with a little bit of external rotation. So with that said, that told me that either those muscles are extremely tight and they are preventing the muscles from firing up, or there's some sort of tightness somewhere else that is preventing those muscles from correctly firing up, like the right side. Of course, though, we do have to take into account that being a lefty and a righty does come into play with having a stronger left to right side. And of course, he was right-handed. So with all this brand new information, here was the new game plan. I first wanted to go back and release all the muscles we did in the previous week just a little faster. I like to think of this as more of a touch-up and a maintenance more than anything. And of course, this means I worked on the psoas, the glutes, the QL, and the quads. To be clear here, this wasn't the main focus for the treatment because that was going to shift into helping him actually get stronger specifically in his left leg. What we started off with was dead bugs on the table. You see, the goal of the dead bug is to not only help him strengthen his core and his glutes, but to also teach him some coordination by swinging opposite arm and opposite leg at the same time. Just think about how you walk. When you walk, it's going to be opposite arm and opposite leg swinging forward and backwards. And here, I really want to train him and his body to do this with ease without him thinking about it. So when he does actually go for a walk, especially without his cane, he doesn't have to rely on it. Now, with that said, I'm actually thinking about it right now. That cane can actually impede, or it may actually impede on his coordination with opposite arm, opposite leg, because one is constantly getting pulled with the other, which may alter your gait pattern. Just something to think about. If you are an expert in this stuff, let me know in the comment section. And besides working on his coordination, like I said earlier, this is a great exercise in order to work on your core strength, which you can see him doing here by having him squeeze his hands and his knees into my arm at the same time, while also moving the opposite side. So here he gets to strengthen the core, but also work on coordination. Not the right coordination we want technically, but it's still a great exercise for core strength and coordination. Now from here, we moved into strengthening one leg at a time by doing touchdowns on these steps outside of his apartment. Now there are some pros and cons to me doing this. And the pros are I'm able to see how strong he is with one leg versus the other. And I can see how his body moves with one little movement and I can see how his body basically moves one leg at a time versus having them together. But looking back in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have started him with single leg touchdowns and instead should have started him with something more stable like basic squats. My bad. Now, after doing the single leg touchdowns, we then moved into his post assessments, and here were his results.
And yeah, it does help to swing the arms.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Nice and slow. So, yep, same exact spot you went.
And it seems like the left leg is the one that tends to, get off balance more.
Left side specifically?
Yeah. I mean, because it'll.
Yeah. Yeah, it does look weaker. And now that we know that, we can definitely address it a lot more. And I can give you stuff to do by yourself too.
Uh-oh, black cat, move. It's looking for some breakfast or lunch or get out of here. Oh,
Kitty!
they're stubborn.
Come back, kitty!
Okay.
All right.
Wow.
Now, let me be honest here, because he did still have some pain after going all the way around the building. But he reported to have half the pain while going double the distance, which in both of our books is a huge win. And I do have another session with Greg in a few weeks with a tweaked game plan. So if you want to see how much progress he made in just another single session, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.